Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for an informational session on Dr. Kemi Dole's sister study and how you can help as an ambassador of our fundraising efforts. Here is our agenda for today. This is a really casual way to meet Dr. Dole and connect with others who are rallying around this cause and get answers to any burning questions that you might have for Dr. Dole or the fundraising team. My name is Andrea Larson, and I'm the Assistant Director of Grassroots Fundraising on the Hutch Philanthropy team. Working with passionate fundraisers who support our research through crowdfunding efforts is one of my most favorite things, so I am thrilled to see all of you here today. We are here specifically to help raise $188,000 to bridge a funding gap that will move forward a $6 million project to improve outcomes for Black women with endometrial cancer. And here with me is Dr. Kemi Dole, who is a gynecologic oncologist, health equity researcher, the co-founder of ICANA, and the sister studies investigator. So I will let her jump in and chat about what ICANA is and take it from there.
Black women in the United States have an over 90% higher mortality after endometrial cancer than white women in the United States, 90%. So just to put that into context, that's twice the disparity that we see in breast cancer. That is larger than the disparities that we see in cervix and colon, like in lung cancer and the things that you probably have heard about. It is a more profound difference by race that we have in endometrial cancer. And meanwhile, endometrial cancer is the most common gynecologic cancer in the US. So most people know about their pap smears, but most people don't know when I tell them that endometrial cancer is 4 times more common than cervix cancer, 4 times. It's twice as common as ovarian cancer. So in the US, it's about 1 in 37 women who are going to be affected by this cancer. So when you consider how common it is and how stark the disparity is, it was really amazing that in 2016, when I was looking around and saying, well, I want to connect with a community of survivors of Black women with endometrial cancer to work with them to figure out what's going on, there wasn't one. And so although this was absolutely not on my professional development research plan, I realized that I had a really responsibility to be able to support the creation of such a group. And so that's really how ICANA was born, with Black women who had survived endometrial cancer and myself coming together to create a group that was really focused on community education around this condition, supporting women who were diagnosed with this condition. I can talk about this a little bit more at the end as well. And then also making sure that we were involved in research partnerships. So bringing the Black women with this disease to the table. One of the reasons why that disparity is as bad as it is because we really actually haven't had any studies focused on improving outcomes for Black women with this condition. Next slide. So a little bit of background on the sister study is that it really came directly out of multiple years of work with ICANA. So we were exploring all sorts of aspects that made endometrial cancer difficult, and there are a lot. And so there are some biological factors where Black women are more likely to get aggressive forms of endometrial cancer, another totally fascinating area of research that I'm interested in. And then there are also access issues. Can people get to the doctor? And one of the things that we consistently found that came up over and over was this issue of social isolation. And this is it comes from the fact that there are kind of different ways of communicating around reproductive symptoms and a lot of silencing and shame around bleeding and things like that Black women were experiencing and were telling us about. But ultimately, they kept saying over and over, when I was diagnosed with the cancer, like I was alone. There wasn't a group. There wasn't anybody I could go to. I didn't feel comfortable telling people this is what I had. I thought it meant that I was promiscuous, all of these issues. Now, why was that important? Well, not just because that's poor quality of life, and we don't want that for any person diagnosed with cancer, but we actually have data in ovarian cancer. Next animation. Oh, I thought this was something else. Okay, go back. We actually have data in ovarian cancer that that social isolation when you're going through treatment is actually associated with lower survival. And I think all of us understand at some level that we are biological beings that live in an environment. And so like our biology, our physiology is affected by our environment. We understand that when we're really stressed, we might get sick the next week. But when we zoom out in terms of cancer care, what we realized was that profound isolation that was happening when women were diagnosed. We actually can find and track molecular changes in the tumor environment that make it more likely to progress and more likely to recur. And so considering that we had a biological pathway and we had women saying, this is a huge area of need, we need to provide support, that's how the sister study was born. And so you can see a couple of quotes there from some of the women that we talked to as we were developing the study as a priority. Next slide. Okay, so I promised Andrea I would not get too in the weeds, but I did want to make it clear that our study interventions are based on these social interventions. So we have one aspect where we're providing what's called usual care, which right now is basically just information. We are enhancing that with more of like a kind of a care package and information about nutrition and shake recipes and things that people can do along the way through their treatment. And then we have another arm where we're doing support groups, and then a third one where we're doing one-on-one peer support. These interventions they're amazing. They were developed specifically by the women affected. They are so comprehensive and thoughtful. And we're doing them not just again for quality of life, but because we actually know the downstream effects. And what the sister study is doing as a study is we are measuring everything that you see there highlighted in yellow. So we can actually clarify for the rest of the cancer world, so not just endometrial cancer in Black women, how these factors are related from the time from social isolation all the way through to somebody completing treatment. And treatment completion is really the focus of our outcome, to make sure that we can get women all the way through their prescribed treatment, because we know that has such an impact on mortality. Next. And am I going too fast? Am I doing okay, Andrea? Okay. So just to give it a little bit more, just to give it a little bit more specifics for those who want the nitty gritty, we have basically 3 goals of the study, and it's a hybrid design. So I want to just explain that a little bit. So one is that we are intervening with these social support interventions. They are all virtual, and that was serendipitous. So we've been developing this study for 2 years, and we submitted this study, and then coronavirus showed up actually after our grant window. We had no idea that this was going to happen. But it turned out that we were perfectly poised to demonstrate how much impact you can have even when we all can't connect like we normally like to. So we're determining to what extent these support interventions improve the recommended treatment completion. So allowing Black women to get all the way through their treatment. And the measure we're using is a pretty standard measure we use in endometrial cancer clinical trials. Our second aim is that we're actually comparing the effectiveness of these different one-on-one versus group support, because we understand that some women are going to thrive in a group, other women aren't, and what we're doing is fairly distinct. So on the one-on-one support, they're really getting virtual, almost like a virtual friend in the chemo room with them as they're going through their treatment, whereas the group support is more focused around education and support about side effects. And then our third aim, I think, is just really important, and maybe it's only important to me, I don't know, but this work is not about one study. It's actually about changing practice. It's about changing care. And what we understand is that we can get this great big grant and we can execute this study, but if we don't learn how it's being done and what's working and what's not, what's acceptable to our healthcare staff, to the peer support providers, and what's not, it's never going to be able to be replicated. It will just be a great story. So we have an entire other arm of the study where we're actually evaluating and taking data on the process of giving this support. And so we can have information on how to implement it at cancer centers once we have the data about the effectiveness and what was most effective for which groups. And that's something I think is really important and unique about the study. Next slide. Oh my gosh, I have so much more to say. We can put it in the Q&A. So I am so glad for all of you to be here. I think one of the things that I do want to highlight that wasn't on the slides is that this concept of engaging with the community around research, we take very seriously, and I take it very seriously. And over the several years, we've developed really strong relationships with this community of Black women survivors, to the point that at this point, the sister study, we employ our Black women survivors as study staff. So the director of our peer supporters is a Black woman survivor of endometrial cancer who would have been here, but she has the flu, Adrienne Moore. And all of the support, if you had that question in your mind, well, who is providing the support? It's being provided by Black women survivors. So all of the women enrolled in our studies are being paired by women who've literally gone through the same thing that they have. And that was the most important piece that they said, just seeing somebody who's been through it before. That leads me to why we have a gap, which is part of the issue with the funding of this study, is that because of some like regulatory conditions, we are limited in how much we can support the women who are literally giving the support for the study. And we want to make sure that we're honoring their contribution just as much as we honor the contribution of the statisticians, and just as much as we honor the contribution of the other members, the other co-investigators that and people that work on the study. So I am super, super excited that you all are here and that you care enough about this issue to be here. And I am very open and excited about answering any questions about this study or Ecana or anything else that would help you spread the word. So thank you.
If anyone would like to unmute and ask any questions right away, please feel free before I jump into how you can help.
Hi, this is Anita Armstrong, and first I'd like to apologize for being late. I got a flat tire.
Oh, no.
But you know, I was still here at 10 after, so I count that as good. I would like to know, like the first that I heard about this was, as you know, through a meeting of the Board of Ambassadors, and I had just not, well, actually, no, Jeff brought this to my attention, and I immediately started spreading the word, but I guess I'm just wondering why I'd never heard about it before. Like, it just seems so, I mean, as a Black woman, you would think that this would be something that I would know. Like, and I guess I just don't get that part. Can you help, Dr. Dahl? I mean, I just don't.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Andrea said I could be casual with y'all. So I mean, I'm just gonna like tell you what I think. So thank you for the question, Benita. And for what it's worth, this is the reaction every time I talk about this.
I bet.
And I have a whole nother slide deck about how we got here.
Okay.
But I'll offer you some points. So one, gynecologic oncology is one of the few cancer specialties that's within OBGYN. It's not actually within medical oncology and radiation oncology. So there's this weird way in which cancers of the female reproductive tract live in this like alternative cancer world. And that has actually impacted research and awareness and things like that about these cancers. Now, what allows us to kind of tip the scales on that in some ways is cervical cancer became a public health problem.
Yeah.
So the reason why everybody knows about cervical cancer is because the CDC took it up as a public health campaign, not because gynecologic oncologists were out here talking about it that much. So that's one of the differences. And one of my goals in my advocacy is to have the CDC take up endometrial cancer as a public health campaign in the same way. It certainly meets all the other thresholds for that. The next thing to consider is that, you know, that 90% mortality gap is significant because the average survival of endometrial cancer is over 80% after 5 years. It's known as a, quote, good cancer. That's not me, I'm just saying it, but like that's the language around it, is that most women are diagnosed early and most women are going to survive. The problem is Black women don't fall into that category. So barely more than half of Black women survive. And so it's unfortunately a kind of cancer where the people who are dying are not necessarily the people who we have valued overall. And so it doesn't have this large advocacy community, and a lot of women who are diagnosed get a hysterectomy and that's it. They don't need chemo, they don't need treatment. So it's a silent diagnosis. So nobody ever knows that they had endometrial cancer. Nobody ever talks about the fact that it happened. It's another reason why, you know, the women are like, I feel so isolated. How come I never heard about this?
Sure.
So those are some of my thoughts about how we get here. I have more thoughts about how we focus on reproductive, you know, rights and maternity. We don't really focus on women who are older and like what's going on with their health, especially with regard to their reproduction, right? We kind of forget that those organs are still there. Like I have other ideas about that, but ultimately it has kind of become this perfect storm of vulnerability. And so since I started my work in 2016, I still have to start my talks, even with researchers and doctors, about just basic statistics around endometrial cancer. It is changing. I was on Good Morning America in December, and I got so many emails back about people saying, I had never heard of this. I cannot believe, like, what is this? And so I think that we are moving in the right direction. And for the first time ever, the National Cancer Institute director, the NCI director, Ned Sharpless, he spoke about endometrial cancer at a hearing, and they were talking about like funding. And he said, oh, another area we need to think about is endometrial cancer. And that's like literally never happened. So we're moving in the right direction, but you are not alone in this feeling of how is this something I've never heard about? And it's obviously why I feel so passionate about the work that I do, because I think there's so much possibility. You know, the statistics are really dismal, but that's also because we barely started here. And so that's what gets me so excited about how much we could do.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you for what you're doing. We're here to help.
Thank you.
Dr. Dahl, this is Beth Castleberry, and I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about the timeline for your study and when you think it might be published as it relates to us getting out there and garnering more support.
Yes. Okay. So the study we just started. So we opened enrollment in September of 2021. So the study itself is a 2.5-year study. When people are on the study, they're on for 6 months. So our intervention time is 6 months. But the study will run for 2.5 years. So we can recruit enough women to do our analyses. So my expectation is that in terms of like the actual, like the final big paper of the study, y'all know research is super slow. So it's going to be a solid 3 years. However, I think I'm going to like pivot a little bit to ICANA. Like, so one of the things that we built into the study are 2 things. One, dissemination in the community. So we're going to be having webinars every year where we're talking about what we're learning on the sister study, what we found out so far, like what we can share, even if we can't share the final results. So that's kind of baked in. And also, you know, because of my experience in co-founding ICANA and getting the word out, I just understand the importance of visibility. Like, I just understand, like, people need to know it. It's not so much about like if they're in a center where the study is open, they need to know about it. So I am certainly promoting it on my social media. I mean, we made a beautiful recruitment video for this purpose. Like, we need more and more people talking about endometrial cancer, which will inspire more and more research in this area. And then I would just say that in terms of my research, my other research, and then ICANA has kind of a research dissemination arm. So we have Q&A articles up on the website. You know, we try to stay up to date with the most recent studies that have coming out around endometrial cancer and what's important, and then try to do like digestible bites on our social media. So we're also getting out to women like things they need to know about their diagnosis.
Anyone else out there with questions?
I'm curious, Dr. Dahl, how you go about recruiting the volunteers, the support team, and I assume that's maybe not just regional, but potentially national. How do you
National.
how do you find those amazing people to volunteer to do,
Gosh.
or not
Yes.
volunteer, but participate?
Participate, yes. So what we did is, so we have, ICANA has a leadership steering group, and one of the programs of ICANA is that we run a bi-weekly support, like kind of drop-in Zoom chair yoga, like kind of wellness session for survivors. It's called Survivor Sanctuary. So from the Survivor Sanctuary, they're participants who've come in and been really excited about getting involved in advocacy and support work. We also had a conference in 2019, which is the first time there was ever a conference focused on Black women with endometrial cancer. And we brought together survivors from all over the country. So we had about 20 survivors come to that conference, and this was a separate project, but we did a peer education, a community education campaign in 2019 over the entire year, where they came from 13 different states. They learned about endometrial cancer, and then they all went home and they did community education sessions in their community. And these were like in their living room, in the library, all pre-COVID, obviously, but really trying to shift the silencing part, like the part about silencing of symptoms. And so we also had that network of ICANA ambassadors that are very well trained and well versed in this area, and that have already done community work and been excited about it. And then the last thing is that anytime someone is diagnosed with an endometrial cancer and they reach out to us via our website, a Black woman, we will reach out one-on-one and connect them with one of our steering group members or somebody in our community. So over time, since 2017, we basically built up this virtual community of people, and some of them are just there for support, but others, they move through their treatment, they get better, and then they're just so passionate about wanting to help. So when we were putting the grant together for the sister study, they actually made a video for us that we submitted with our application, talking about how much they wanted to do this work, how dedicated they were to doing this work. And so we thought we wanted to recruit 10 over the 3 years and to start with 4, and we had 10 out the gate. So, and we have a waiting list because we're like, we don't have work for you yet. So yeah, that's where we found them, really through just like human connection, via the power of social media and people reaching out to us, and then the programs that we've done.
I do have one other question. So what, at least in our area locally, what has the outreach been already? Like, as I know LaShonda and I are working with the Microsoft community. We've already reached out to the sisters at Microsoft, and thanks to some other folks, we're also trying to reach out to the same type groups at other local companies. But I'd like to know, like, what has been done around the Puget Sound area thus far. Like, we wouldn't want to duplicate efforts if other folks are already out there doing the same thing that we're trying to do. So it would be helpful just to kind of know what's, where you are, and like, ideally, if you had the best gift you could ever get, like, how would you prefer we get out there and spread the word where it hasn't already been spread?
Yeah. Thank you, Benita and LaShonda, since you mentioned her name. So this is where I'm like, I'm not a fundraising expert. So I like nothing. So you can go out anywhere you want. Like, I've just been so laser focused on the women and the community. So it's like, I do community events, but like, I just go to the church. Like, I go to churches and talk about people's vaginas and bleeding and what we should do about it. Like, I go to the health fairs, and I'm like, I promise I will make everybody uncomfortable and be entertained. Can I please come talk about endometrial cancer? So I have to say, like, my community outreach has been so geared towards the education piece and towards trying to get into health fairs. I really haven't done a lot of philanthropy outreach at all locally. One person that I have been in contact with, just because Seattle is small in terms of the networks, is Ruby Love. So Ruby Love, I met through UW. Through UW philanthropy, like, kind of fundraising efforts, and she's just become a friend. And so her and Jesse Willie Wilson hosted like a small event. This was a few years ago now, in their home. And we kind of have like a small event learning about all of this endometrial cancer and the cause, but I haven't done any kind of outreach, corporate outreach or groups around the area. So I think that I doubt that you will retread territory.
Yeah, I will jump in now. Bonita, that was the perfect segue into my lines for this slide already on deck. But the number one way to help is to share this information with your network, because your network is most likely new to this effort and to Kemi's effort. And so if we can think of it as like a spider web, and we're shooting off into all of these different directions, we're reaching new people that could potentially be supporters and donors, but also new advocates and ambassadors. And we have the tools to teach and inform all of those folks to be just like the people on this call today. One other thing I want to mention, because yes, there's some awareness to this, but we're also asking for dollars. That when it comes to crowdfunding, there are no donations that are too small or too large, and there are surprises around every corner. There's opportunities to get your workplace giving campaigns involved, like Anita and LaShonda are doing, but also, there's other ideas like asking to give $5 a month. The donation page that we have set up accepts monthly donations. So an ongoing gift that's smaller might be a fun campaign for someone to play around with. But every little bit helps, and everything that you can do to try to gain new eyes onto this really important work is very valuable to Kemi and the rest of the study. And I'm going to go in quickly about tools that we have for you in terms of how to help you with that. And then we can open it up for even more questions since we've got plenty of time. Like I said, share with your network. We have created a toolkit to make it really easy for you to take content that we've already prepared, that Kemi's approved, and put it out on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, and invite those people that are asking questions and are really engaged with those posts to come back to me, and I can get them in touch with Kemi. I can give them more tools, and I can send them the toolkit and the recording of this session, and we can just keep spreading the word and keep going spiderweb to spiderweb. We would love as many people as possible to share this work on Giving Tuesday, which is the Tuesday after Thanksgiving on November 30th. It is a huge day in terms of philanthropy, and you'll see lots of different people sharing why they are supporting certain nonprofits that are important to them. And we want as many of you as possible to be a part of that sister study network on that day specifically. So if you choose one day to share out all of these posts and why it's important, have it be that day. I will also mention that our fundraising team at Fred Hutch can really help you customize your strategy for your network, whether it's your workplace giving campaign, or if you want to host a holiday event and have some sort of beneficiary or nonprofit support donation tied into that. If you're tailgating for the Apple Cup, anything like that can have an element added to it where you're asking donations and teaching people about the sister study. We are all ears, and I love brainstorming these ideas and making them really customized to these groups, because that's where the organic enthusiasm lies. And that's all I have for the basics for support. I'm going to open the floor back up again and ask if anyone has any more questions for Kemi. If you have any specific fundraising ideas or successes that you might want to share with the group, please join in.
Dr. Dole, I'm curious if you could talk a little more about Okana. It sounds like there are many arms to it, and I'm curious to I feel like I'm seeing the arms, and I'm just curious to kind of see the overview, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah. So Okana is, it's a multi-stakeholder group. So it's myself, another researcher, and then mainly our steering group is made up of 4 Black women with endometrial cancer survivors. And then we have a community member who's been a breast cancer advocate for over 20 years, but really has built an impressive body of work in terms of advocacy around Black breast cancer and Black women. So that's our leadership group. And what I was saying before, this is when like deeply wishing for my other slide deck, so we have, we got together and really brainstormed and decided on 3 foci. Like, we understand we can't do everything. So we really decided on visible community. So there is, like, you'll see there's an emphasis in Okana on the website, like and what it looks like and how it's inviting and welcoming in, and our Instagram account, and like the colors you see there, like, because we really recognize that people get this diagnosis and they Google, and before Okana, they would not find any representation of themselves, other than really terrible sounding statistics. So that's one of the things that we do. And then we also, build community. So I kind of talked about that a little before, but I think it's not a small thing that essentially any Black woman who reaches out to us who've been diagnosed, we connect with one-on-one, work them through the first few stages, kind of get them settled, and then move them into our support group. And that's been very, very successful. So that's one aspect of ECANA, and we have basically a kind of a peer care group within ECANA that does that kind of outreach. Then separately, we have a mission around education, and that's educating the community and providers. And I think that's really important because unfortunately, what we found in my research is not just that there's silencing and there's lack of awareness around endometrial cancer, especially in the Black community, but also when I would go, like I said, and give talks to providers, this is really a lower priority issue. Like people hadn't heard of it. They didn't know about the disparity, especially. And so we're just wrapping up a study where we surveyed 1,500 providers all over the country, mostly what I call first line. So like ER doctors, primary care doctors, internal medicine doctors. Most women over the age of 60 don't continue to go to an OBGYN, right? And yet most endometrial cancer is diagnosed during that age. So these are the doctors and providers that women are disclosing their symptoms to for the first time. And unfortunately, in this study, what we found is that less than half knew about the signs of endometrial cancer, knew the correct steps to take next, and knew that Black women were at particular risk of high risk types that need to be acted on quickly. So ECANA as an organization, we want to, provide more education to the community. And that's what we did with our Community Empowerment Partners program in 2019, which went on a hard pause with COVID. But that's what we were doing with that program. And then our other mission is really to have provider training. So that's one of our growth areas for next year, is to develop a sequence around provider training to explain even language. So even understanding when somebody says have you had any bleeding? They might say no, but in their mind, they're like, oh, I just had some spotting. Okay. So that is a missed opportunity. And what we know about Black women's gynecologic health, I'm trying not to get totally ranty here, but Black women along every single pathway of their reproductive life course in the United States have worse outcomes. So endometrial cancer is just the end. But we've heard about maternal mortality. We've heard about issues with endometriosis and fibroids. But what that means is that you have a group of women that we've normalized severe bleeding. We've normalized severe pelvic pain. All of these things are normal within communities of Black women, of something we just suffer from. So when you have a 62-year-old Black woman that has a day of spotting, it makes sense that she's not going to run to the doctor. So we need to adjust also the expectations of our providers to understand that we need to be proactively screening people for symptoms. We can't wait for people to think, oh, I need to come in, as we also educate the community about these symptoms and empower them to advocate. So yes, so that's that lane. And then in terms of research partnership, we kind of have different levels. So ECANA is a very tight collaborator with Sister for obvious reasons, but we recognize that there are people doing endometrial cancer research across the country, and there's more and more who are interested in doing equity work in endometrial cancer, and they don't have a community to advocate with, because we are it. So we started a model where we're we want to make sure that studies that have nothing to do with us are welcoming, that Black women want to enroll, that we can increase our numbers on clinical trials. So we have basically a consultation almost service where researchers who are inclined and want the input of Black women survivors on their study design, on their recruitment materials, what they're doing, can reach out and meet with us. And we have some of those more short-term and some long-term relationships. So we're really trying at every level to bring Black women to the table in the conversation. And then we also, one of our members is on the National Cancer Institute kind of uterine trial committee, which I think is a really big deal. Also the first time it's ever happened. So she is the patient representative for that committee now. And that was a big win for us. There's only one spot, and for it to be a Black woman now in 2021 that's on that spot, seeing every single clinical trial coming through for uterine cancer and looking at it with an equity lens, is another real area in that world of research partnership that we're proud of. So that's kind of the scope of what ECANA does. We want to do more. I tell people we are small but mighty. We are scrappy. I think these women are amazing, and they have so much excitement. They have so much energy and so many ideas, and we're really excited to build further next year, and really kind of build out more infrastructure. I mean, we've kind of been running on excitement and sweat And so I'm excited about building out some more infrastructure for ECANA so that, we can really continue these programs and expand even more. So that's a little bit about ECANA.
Kemi, I'm thinking that I know you've explained this to me, but your study, you have a grant for $6 million.
We do.
Why is there $188,000 that's not covered? Can you explain what that actual gap covers and allows you to do?
Yeah. So the way that most, not all, but the way that most clinical trials and research granting institutions, at least at the federal level, are set up, is that they're set up to study biomedical interventions. And so they're comparing radiation to chemotherapy or something like that. And so they have clauses that say you can't use any of our research funds to pay for the intervention, because the assumption is that somebody's insurance is paying for the intervention. So a lot of people don't know this before they enter the clinical trial world. So it means that, if there's a trial that you might want to be on, the way that the trial has been designed is that it's funded to collect your data, and it's funded to enroll patients, and it's funded to do the analysis, but your insurance is getting the bill for the drug, right? Or your insurance is getting the bill for the radiation therapy technique. So that matters a lot with us, because our intervention is the community. Our intervention is supporting these women, paying these women to provide this kind of support, to develop the support materials, to run the groups, to connect with people when they're down, to encourage people to continue. And that isn't reimbursable. There isn't a billing code for that. So we're in this position where we have all of this funding to orchestrate the study, but we literally are forbidden. We cannot use any of the funds to pay the women literally at the heart of it, that are doing the work themselves and that are irreplaceable, because the experience that they're coming with and their enthusiasm and their affinity for this work and the training they've gone through to be ready for it, it's so rare to find. And so this is where our funding gap is coming from right now, is that we actually can't pay them with our study. And so the donations to this cause are literally directly going to support the Black women survivors who are doing this kind of work. And I mean, obviously it's a larger conversation around how we've kind of designed our research infrastructure. We say that we want more studies in equity. We say that we want more studies in disparities. We want to know what works, but then we have an infrastructure and research that's set up to only fund one kind of thing. And so, I mean, it's like, I need to clone myself, but it's like another hat I need to put on, is that, like what we have is the result of our structures, right? And so until our research structures change and recognize that they're like very powerful interventions, some of which are biomedical, but some of which are not, but have direct biomedical outcomes, like direct outcomes on whether people finish their chemo, whether people live or survive, then we're going to continue to have this huge disparity between how we fund this kind of work. And so we're going to continue to have the inequalities. But that is where the gap comes from. Was that clear, Andrea? Okay.
Yes, thank you, Kemi. Any other questions? Almira, see your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I also feel pretty impressed that I figured out how to raise my hand on Zoom on a phone. So pretty excited about that. I have a question. I'm sitting here like totally amazed by all of this. So thank you for everything, both the actual scientific information, which is not my specialty, and also just all the advocacy work you're doing. And it has me kind of thinking big picture of, can you think of other cancers and or other socioeconomic and or racial areas that could really benefit from something like this? Like, I'm realizing this would be a total blind spot for me, that I would not have known about the impact on African-American women with endometrial cancer without this study. And I even would say I'm probably someone who's more plugged into this, being so involved with Fred Hutch. And so it just has me thinking, yeah, either of specific cancers and or socioeconomic groups, racial groups, maybe even like gendered ones, just areas that you have seen or heard about other blind spots in the way research is being done now. Does that make sense? It's a super broad
I think
question.
it does.
Sorry.
It is. I'm gonna try. No, it's okay. I'm gonna do my best though. I
Okay,
think
great.
it does.
Thank you.
So, so there are a couple things that come to mind. I will recall what I said about the spectrum of reproductive, like the reproductive life course is what I think about it. So right now we have a huge spotlight, deservedly, on maternal mortality and Black women and maternal mortality. But I keep reminding people that is like actually that's like the apex of an entire life course of poor outcomes. So like things that are underfunded just consistently, endometriosis, fibroids, these things cause incredible morbidity. We lose so much money every year in our economy from missed work, horrible quality of life. And we have very little research around those areas right now in women's health, because again, we tend to think about women's health being the same thing as maternal health. And we have a ways to go, I think, in our public consciousness, but also in research to expand beyond research just around reproduction and recognize all of the other aspects. Like most people with female reproductive organs are not going to be pregnant most of the time, but yet all of the research about their quality of life and about their reproductive organs are almost like 90% is focused on when they're pregnant. So that is like a huge kind of area that there's availability for more support. Other blind spots I would say is our Indigenous communities. So, and this is because, again, structurally, so the way that we record cancer statistics is through a cancer registry system. And so we identify race, ethnicity, essentially from state registrars that are pulling it from like medical records. And what we know about being Indigenous or Native American is that those hospital-based and medical care-based designations are not very accurate, because up until very recently, basically people didn't ask. They just looked at people and assumed. And you really can't do that very well, especially when you're talking about Native American Indigenous population. And so what that means is that in our national cancer statistics, we have underreporting of that entire group of people and their cancers and their outcomes. And so there's a body of work, a woman named Amanda Brugel is a gynecologic oncologist in this space. There are only two Native American gynecologic oncologists in the entire country. Just so in case y'all were curious, there's about 32 Black gynecologic oncologists in the entire country. 32, yeah. So that's what we're working with. But anyway, so back to the Native population. So what she's been able to do, because she's Native herself, she's been working with tribes on their actual citizen lists, right? So their actual tribal citizen list. And she did work comparing that to what is reported in the cancer registry, even just for our region. So even just for the Western Washington, like Puget Sound region, showing that it was woefully undercounting the number of cancers among this population. And even worse, it was like kind of falsely elevating better outcomes than there actually were. So what she was able to show is like much more significant outcomes in cervical and endometrial cancer among this group than we would see in our routine national cancer statistics. And so that's a blind spot, because you all know how the government works, right? Like they produce these statistics and then we benchmark our funding at the National Cancer Institute off these kinds of statistics. And so when you ask, like, how come you don't have studies in this area, or how come we don't have targeted grant mechanisms to study this? And somebody looks at the graphs and they say, well, there's no problem because we're not capturing it. So that's another huge blind spot. I think obviously at the Hutch, we do, I think, there's a lot of good work in Native and Indigenous populations, but just kind of like backing out more broadly, I think that's a huge area that's overlooked. I feel like those are the two areas I can comment on with some authority. I do think in general, something I want to mention, right? So our gender diverse community, so trans non-binary people, I can tell you my field, OBGYN and gynecologic oncology, we're like limping along trying to catch up with where we need to be in terms of care, accessibility. So that's somewhere I want to go. I can't go yet from where we are, but that's like somewhere I want to go. Is I don't know like who is capturing statistics on screening and cancer diagnoses with respect to reproductive organs among people who are trans and non-binary. So it's like, it goes beyond like you might have a lung cancer. It's like now you have a cancer that is really distinctly related, right, to the gender identity. So I think that's an area just of opportunity is what I would put. And then lastly, even though there is a lot of rural urban work, there's a lot of work around people who just live farther away from systems. there's not a lot of intersectional work. So a lot of the work around kind of like the rural urban construct and like where we might find disparities is really kind of, it's just from this framework of kind of like everybody in the country who's rural is white, which is ridiculous, but that's how it, I mean, that's literally how the literature reads, and that's who we engage. And yet there's like so much diversity in those areas too. A lot of times that go uncounted. So I'm also just like, I have like a personal interest in like what that looks like when we apply some of these intersectional lenses to areas outside of like the metropolitan area that we kind of think of as being more diverse in terms of identity.
That was amazing. Thank you very much. Also, a reminder that you are extremely badass. Oh, and I'm sorry, Fred Hutch, that is now on the recording. But thank you so much. Those are super great examples. And you actually, I know you can't see my face because I'm on my phone again, but I was nodding my head at a lot of them, even when you were talking about even the studies of like, you know, women and maternal. I'm thinking about how I'm, you know, yeah, that's most of the time when you talk about anything related to your body is related to when you are pregnant and or when you're trying to become pregnant. And it's like,
exactly,
that's a small period of a woman's life. And so just
so
huge
tiny.
thank you. Yeah, huge thank you. And those were great examples. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
I think we have time for one final question or comment.
I would just like to say thank you so much for all that you're doing and all of the folks that you're like just kind of gathering to help spread the word, bring in some money. And I know for myself, and I know LaShonda, like we were just IMing with each other, like we've got to like really like start putting a fire under folks and like doing what we can to help in any way that we can. And we'll continue to do that. And if you ever come up with an idea, I know Jeff reaches out to me and I thank him for that all the time. And then just let us know. Like if you come up with some idea that you maybe one of those 3 a.m. I don't know if you get those because I do those 3 a.m.
I do.
Girls, send it over the fence. We will just hear your people. So let us know how we can help, because this is like, LaShonda and I were just like, I am like, dude, we gotta do something. And so we're here for you, whatever that means and however that looks. But we're here for you till we fill up that 188.
I will echo
and beyond.
And so I'm LaShonda. I'll echo what Benita's saying. We've been like going crazy. And I think just you talking about so it's Indigenous Heritage Month right now at Microsoft.
Yes.
So one thing that we do have at Microsoft, we do have a little solicitation policy, which allows us not to solicit outside of October, and we have Heritage Month. So we allow different ERG heritage groups to do this. So I'm like, what we need to do, we would need to bring you back this month at a time to bring you under the Indigenous ERG. But mind you, other people can join as well, but it will be an event that they're putting on because they can fundraise in the month of October. Other people cannot. So I think that, and then also being that you have a talking point and a talk track that goes to them, that's extra beneficial. And your information is so great, and other people can join. So
it's just really about the love.
Yeah, I would really like Benita and I, like she said, we're IMing each other. So really, we will really love to make that happen because I thought this information was so valuable as well. And I think we have an audience that can help us drive it. Being the ERG.
For sure.
That is very exciting. I can also come back in February. February is also always very busy, but I'm there.
Yes, and so February would be another opportunity because that's BAM, Blacks at Microsoft. That's their Heritage Month. And we're thinking about doing a health track for them. So again, Microsoft has these policies on fundraising in October, but now we have a Heritage Month initiatives that I oversee. So if those ERGs invite you to come back, then we can have this discussion and stuff. So it's all good. I'm so glad I joined this call today.
Thank you.
Yeah. I will connect all of the Microsofties all together with Kenny after this call.
Thank you.
That sounds fabulous. Also, I want to say I'm on social media too. So I have a little side hustle. That's not what we're talking about, but y'all, so like feel free to reach out. I'm just at my government name Kemi Dole on all the socials. So I will be out there too with and I would love I would love to see your efforts and amplify your efforts as well as much as I can on my channel.
I
So
already
thank you.
started on Facebook, but I'll add you to my next push, and we'll see what we can do.
Okay.
Guppy, I see your hand raised.
Sorry, I was just inspired by listening to Bonita and Lashanda. Hi, Dr. Dahl. I'm Guppy. I'm the scientific content strategist in philanthropy. And my question is, how local do we want to stay? Or can we go broader? I'm asking because Tara, who is also on this call, and I are talking with Apple and their equivalent employee resource groups as well. And they are looking to partner with us and talk about some of the research. So it would be like broader West region. It would be across the, so yeah, are you committed to staying local, or do you want to go?
No, we can go, we could go wherever you want to go. We can go, yeah, like, no, I mean, actually, as Benita pointed out, like I haven't been very good about local, I think because in outreaching to find women, I've always had the national lens. So I can say we've definitely elevated the conversation, and we've had some really good national pieces, but absolutely, I think like part of the reason why y'all have never heard of this is because there's one person, I don't know if anybody can name her, but there's been one Black woman ever that publicly has had endometrial cancer that's like been in the press and been in the news. Does anybody know who it is? Gwen Eiffel. Gwen Eiffel died of endometrial cancer. Gwen Eiffel died of endometrial cancer within a year of diagnosis. A cancer where over 80% of people are diagnosed in early stage and survive. Gwen Eiffel died within a year. And so I don't know the details, but I know when I hear about the stories of people bleeding and assuming it's fine and taking care of their symptoms on their own and silencing and lack of awareness, all of that contributes. And we don't have more public facing figures who are willing to say, yes, I've had it too. And of course, I know that they have because of the statistics. It's 1 in 37 women. I know they're out there. So Aminatou Sow is one other person, the co-host of Call Your Girlfriend, who talks about endometrial cancer. And she's actually posted about me and my work, which has also helped us with donations. But I think that we have a huge opportunity because I am 100% convinced that there are very high profile Black women out there who just have not been invited yet to the table to talk about this.
And, just another random follow-up with a different audience, there are a couple of researchers at the Hutch who are studying uterine fibroids in women of color, in Black women particularly. And, and so I'm wondering whether they advertise this at their national talks as well to maybe grow it out through the network of public health epidemiologists that are looking into this as well.
That sounds awesome.
I'm happy to connect if you need as well.
Okay.
Well, this is exactly why I brought all of you together. So thank you for, sparking all of these conversations and these side projects and helping us get the work out. I will connect the couple that just bubbled up after the call, and so you can follow up on those. And then if anyone has any other questions, please feel free to send them my way. I'll get them to Kemi. If you have any fundraising questions or thoughts, I'm here for those 3 a.m. thoughts too, Benita, if you need me. And we are really thrilled to have you all on this team as an ambassador of the sister study. And we're really looking forward to what's to come.